Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sarah's Factory. What started as my fun side hobby quickly turned into this full scale metropolis in Satisfactory. It's hard to believe, but we've finished this world. I've created all of my space elevator parts, and I saved every puppy and kitten along the way. I began this world with a very simple goal of expanding my creativity and imagination. My earliest builds were fairly simple, but as I grew and refined my style, each one became more ambitious than the last. Every building you'll see houses a working factory inside. Each one serves a specific purpose, and they all contribute to the greater factory as a whole. This world was built entirely in vanilla with no mods. To give myself full creative freedom, I used free building, unlimited coupons, flying, and God mode. That said, every factory was still built from the ground up with lots of love as I slowly worked through each space elevator phase. One of my favorite things about this game is how it provides you with a direction. It guided me on when, where, and what scale to build, while still leaving the how completely up to my imagination, especially when it came to decorating and design. I do hope you enjoy this showcase, and stick around until the end for a behind-the-scenes fly-through of some of my favorite builds and what inspired me along the way. I'm also incredibly excited to start my next world with everything I've learned from this playthrough. And I can't wait to kick off a full survival Let's Play series next. And with that, enjoy your visit to Sarah's Factory. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that cinematic fly through of my factory. As promised, we're going to do a little bit of a behind the scenes next. Starting off with, of course, my beautiful dragon bones here. I really don't know what inspired me to create these, but I had a lot of fun challenging my anatomical knowledge, and I actually created this from complete scratch. The detail work that I have done on my castle here, I absolutely love. It's a little bit messy when you look at it up close, but when you're looking at it from far away, it looks amazing. Of course, since this is my Trigon factory, I had to make the Hyrule Castle from The Legend of Zelda, one of my absolute favorite games. Well, besides Satisfactory, that is. This coal factory is one of my very first builds. I wanted to really stretch my ability to figure out these vanilla puzzles, and I figured out this really fun brick texture all on my own. Of course, I did learn later that there was a much easier way to do it, but honestly, I really love the way that it turned out. Over here, we have our carousel. This was one of the first sculpting items that I made in my world, creating these little unicorns to sit inside. Originally, I had a bunch of tick elephants inside of there, but they kept despawning and going all over the place. So now we just have some really cute unicorns to fill up the space. Working our way closer to the factory and down the hill, we have our Topo Chico water processing plant where I package and send out all of my water. Down here is one of my very first factories. This is my smart sheet plating factory. This is when I just was really experimenting with a lot of different building styles and just seeing kind of what clicked for me. Of course, I had to make a little tiny San Francisco bridge here. And don't worry, I will be 100% making one of these in my survival Let's Play series. To the left, we have my aluminum factory. I was so incredibly proud of this factory when I made it because I was like, I'm gonna make this giant factory and I'm gonna make it not box shaped. Well, it looks great, but on the inside, it's pure chaos. But that's okay. That's half the fun, Satisfactory. And that brings us to what I started as my city. I created this massive foundation, trying to kind of go along with the water that was around it. So we have a lot of little rivers and streams that go through. I wanted to give my build a little bit of personality and not just make it box. So very meticulously, I made all of these little angles and then I filled it in so it looks like a tabletop. And of course, we have to give the Sky Needle a little nod. This was one of my very first creations, believe it or not. I was really stretching my abilities here, and it did not turn out perfect. But you really can't tell if you don't look hard enough. There is a fun Easter egg in here, so since this is my sandbox world, inside I have created a little sandbox playset. This is how you can tell this was one of my earliest builds because I had not quite figured out how angled beams worked yet. And that brings us to our main street. So right underneath the space elevator, I created this really long street that goes all the way to the end of the island. That was very intentional. I wanted to make sure that if you were standing near the space elevator, you could see pretty much the entire city. Here's a fun little Easter egg. Since this was 1.1 when it first came out, they came out with all sorts of hypertubes. So creating those like hypertube Ys so you can get in and out. I had to play with it. I made myself, of course, a little subway station down here. Unfortunately, I don't really use it very often just because I do have God mode, fly mode, all of that unlocked, so it's not really, that necessary. But it takes you all the way around the entire city. So now we're popped up next to my computer factory, my little park, and then there's Main Street. This apartment complex was one of my very first builds where I really wanted to stretch out my technique and my style. And this was before I knew that blueprints were a thing, so I actually placed down all of these pieces by hand, which is kind of crazy to think about now because I have learned so much and the versatility of using those blueprints. But this was kind of like opening a can of worms. I was so proud of myself and so excited at what I created. Over here, we have one of my very first skyscrapers. You can tell it's one of my first because I do have a lot of Z fighting going on. But all in all, I think it turned out really good. Simple, but good. To the left, we have our not Empire State Building, but very close to it, heavily inspired by. This was one of the first builds where I actually learned how to use a blueprint. I could not believe it. My eyes were completely wide open and huge after I had figured that out. Using that technique, one of my next builds that I created was this museum kind of looking building based off of the Natural History Museum. On the inside, we just have some coal delivering that is getting picked up by trucks and then taking it throughout the city. But this was created entirely with blueprints, one of my very first blueprint creations. Of course, I had to use blueprints because there is some ridiculous amount of detail that I have managed to shove into this build. For one of my first builds using blueprints, I couldn't be happier. And I just kept going with it. Up next is one of my sneakier builds, where I have a fueling station, my little 7-Eleven on the basement floor, this apartment building, and then right adjacent to it is this giant mecha factory that is something that I just kind of thought of one night. I absolutely love the way it turned out. I didn't have any inspiration for it. Besides maybe, the scene from Incredibles where they walk through like the two lava walls. But who knows? The subconscious is a very crazy thing. The sneaky part about this is that they're actually one factory. So they are connected. So even though they look completely different, they actually are still producing the same things. Most of the transportation is in the apartment buildings, and then the actual mechanics of the build are in the tall skyscraper. If any of you are Spirited Away fans, I really hope that you enjoyed this build. This is something I kind of ridiculously created. I still, yet again, when I made this, I didn't really know what blueprints quite were yet. I wasn't using them to my full potential, but I did use blueprints here or there. The roof itself was a sculpting fiasco. I worked on this for so long, hand placing each beam one by one. Honestly though, it was kind of like crocheting. It just kind of became rhythmic and fun after a while. That was one of my very first builds, so it kind of stuck out like a sore thumb, which inspired me to then make this little village that went next to it, which is also based off of Spirited Away. This little village, I had a lot of fun playing with signs and textures using those beams to create some different effects and creating these like little Chinese lanterns to also go on as well. This build also inspired me to create my San Francisco Chinatown. If we take this bridge all the way across and down, it's going to take you to a little sidewalk that takes you into my Chinatown. I love the architecture here. It is so much fun to try to recreate with all of these like golden accents, swooped roofs, and of course I have to have my little stalls as well. And a food truck. Funny, when I first made this food truck, I didn't know how to make a circle, but honestly, it's kind of adorable. I love how jank it is. Working through our little Chinatown here, I have a firehouse, a little coffee shop with an interior, of course, and cafe. I don't really know what this is. I just called it Rocks. Kim's Convenience, and my assembly director system building as well. And of course, you gotta get your corn dogs. Can't believe I almost forgot to show you guys. One of my favorite Easter eggs that I put into this world is hidden inside of my bathhouse. This bathhouse didn't actually need to be this huge. The only part of the bathhouse that's actually a factory is the top floor. So what's underneath it, you might ask? Well, we have these little roads that go through it naturally. And on the inside, we have a giant rock that I have covered in these beautiful little slugs. I didn't know what else to do with it, so obviously, slugs were the answer. To the left of the bathhouse, we have our little flooded area along with the train station and these little houses that the Spirited Away train passes by. This was one of my absolute favorite things that turned out in this build. It is pretty simple, but I spent so much time trying to get this darn roof right. In the end, I absolutely love it, and I would not have done it a different way. On the inside too, I accidentally stumbled upon something. When you put a bunch of signs that are overlapping, the Z fighting kind of creates this fire effect. This build is up on the list for one of my favorite builds in this entire world. This is based off of a hotel in the Caribbean called the Pink Atlantis. Of course, mine's going to look a little bit different because it's in Satisfactory, so I've dubbed this one the Pink Palace. I am just amazed with what I did with this so early on because I still didn't really know how blueprints worked, and I'll tell you what, this took forever to complete. Now, as a seasoned builder, I am kind of giggling at myself and thinking about how I could have done it so much quicker. But it turned out so good, and of course, I learned so much along the way. Speaking of top contenders, this one is definitely up there. This build is based off of the Flatiron Building in New York City. On the inside, it is just a bunch of particle accelerators stacked on top of each other, so I was able to get away with a super skinny build. This is housing my nuclear pasta production. By the time I got this far into my little city island, I had really figured out a good building style that worked really well for me. So I made this party house, complete with tractors, dance floor with little Trumpy on top, dancing his little heart out, and a little nod to my LGBTQ friends. I also created these little palm trees. They are so stinking adorable, and I am excited to try to make them again in my next world. To the right of that, we have my giant spiral tower. So, funnily enough, this tower was actually inspired by an antique oil lamp that had a little naked lady on the inside just taking a little shower. And I was like, for some reason, that just inspired me to create this. So it is very gold and very in your face, but I love it. And you'll notice these little tractors are delivering their parts, and then they get to drive up this giant spiral where on the top we have the actual mechanical parts of the factory. When they get to the top, where do they go? Well, naturally, I'm making them jump down the middle. This section of the city is absolutely jam-packed with fun builds. To the left, we have a Greek-inspired temple. To the right, a planetarium. Over here, you might recognize this one. This is my beginner-friendly warehouse build that I made a tutorial of, and its other half, the advanced build. I did have plans to make this build as my masterclass build. However, I quickly learned that making tutorial videos is very difficult. So to save time, I just made that one on stream. Over here we have our car wash. This is definitely one of my absolute favorite builds. Ugh, I keep saying that, but I just love it so much. We get to have our little tractors drive through this car wash, and they are so stinking adorable going through the lava wash and then getting these laser beam clean finish. Once you pop out, we have my little tiny tire shop just for fun, a coffee shop, my little Amazon delivery boxes, and if you love burgers, an In-N-Out. Oh, and I can't forget one of my absolute favorite meals, Mexican food. We have 3 Margaritas family-owned restaurant. I love it. I love putting little pink builds into my worlds. It is so much fun adding that little bit of color in. Up next is some pretty deep lore of my world. So I have over here a almost airport I started to work on, but then I of course changed my mind and I didn't actually end up building it the way that I wanted it to be built. So I do have really big plans to make a really cool airport in my next world with everything that I've learned from this one. Panning over, you get to see my nuclear storage, which is a giant cargo ship. Yeah, don't be fooled, that thing is massive. It is just very far away. These are kind of my outskirt factories, so they are kind of box factories, I'll admit, but all of my factories are encased and I try really hard not to have any actual machinery parts exposed. With, you know, the exception of my power plant tower. Keeping on going, this is what I call my sand pit. One of my very first buildings here where I was kind of figuring out how to make different shapes look good. This is my frames building. This is where I was playing around with all of my roads. I learned so hecka much ton doing this. I definitely will be doing that a much different way on my next world, but good learning. Over here too, we have some of my earlier builds, this guy, and then my little ski town lodge over here. You'll also notice my train lines probably look pretty hectic and spaghetti, but it was extremely intentional. After my last playthrough, I learned that path signals kind of suck. Obviously, if you use them correctly, they're not too bad, but I didn't really know how to use them correctly. So, in this world, I decided no path signals, only block signals. So all of my train intersections aren't actually intersections, they're just merges. And it turned out really good. I never have my trains back up. My tractors, they're a different story, but most of the time they do pretty well. We have my second sculpting project, which was this purple Sam dragon, as I call him. Unfortunately, his head turned out a lot bigger than I anticipated, so he's kind of sniffing a rock. But I thought it was going to turn out a lot worse than it did, so I didn't want it to be in front and center. Of course, it turned out pretty darn good, and I do love it. Of course, early me didn't really know too much about Z fighting, so that is going on here. But all in all, I love it. Some very deep lore going on in my world here. And that brings us to the end of this world. What started as a fun side hobby somehow turned into a full-scale industrial city with several questionable design decisions and an army of tractors that, try their best. Along the way, I learned a ton, I broke a few things, but I fixed most of them, and I had so much fun doing it. I can't thank you enough for visiting Sarah's factory with me. Whether you're here for the builds, the organization, or just to silently judge my conveyor choices, I'm really glad you're here. This world may be finished, but my brain has already moved on. Next up is a brand new survival world where there will be no flying, no free building, and every bad decision will be paid for in sweat and coupons. If this video wasn't enough for you, you're in luck. I am providing the download to my world and my Patreon account for free. Don't worry, I'm not going to make you pay for it, but please enjoy my world and have fun exploring it. I had so much fun creating this world, and I want to share it with all of you. If you enjoyed this showcase, hit like. It tells the algorithm this was all worth it. And if you want more builds, more chaos, and a survival let's play where I am absolutely underprepared, please hit subscribe and come watch the chaos unfold. Until then, have fun building!